Welcome back to Morning Trade Live. We want to focus in on some big U.S. companies that have struggled or facing some headwinds recently in China. Joining us now for analysis, we've got Rebecca Walser, President Walser Wealth Management. So, Rebecca, let's kind of dive right into this picture here, and then we can talk big picture markets later in our conversation. But Apple saying today that it has removed WhatsApp and Threads from its app store in China. It was ordered to do so by the Chinese government.
Right.
What does this signal to you?
Well, I think Apple's statement basically said, hey, listen, even if we don't agree with it, we have to comply with the law of the country that we're doing business in. So it doesn't mean that Apple necessarily thinks that this is something they should be doing. It's not an Apple's against maybe free speech on like WhatsApp or what have you. But if they are operating in China, we know that's a different type of government than the United States. It's obviously communistic, and they control a lot more what they're able to share with their citizens, and so Apple has no choice.
All right, this is a strong point, but it just shows the kind of increasing focus on the plans by the Chinese government, and we know, kind of what restrictions are typically like there, and kind of an increasing crackdown with regard to that. They are citing apparently, reportedly, national security concerns. It's according to a Reuters report with regard to that. But you also wonder if it has to do anything with the kind of tit for tat when you think about TikTok.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. I think it's related. And if you look at China, we've seen a broader, first of all, they already told all of their government employees you cannot have an Apple iPhone. That's not going to happen anymore. So you see, like Huawei, their sales went up 64% in Q1. Whereas China went down 24%. That took Apple from the second largest smartphone provider in China to the fourth. So we see that this is kind of, like you're saying, tit for tat. Biden talking about steel tariffs and making them so much more expensive. Apple, China is definitely retaliating where they can. We're seeing it also with Tesla. We're seeing it with Starbucks. Generally, a lot of American multinational corporations that are based also in China are experiencing slowdowns.
So what are you watching in terms of the challenges that Tesla is facing in China? Because to your point, yes, we're seeing it with regard to Tesla. They can't drive Teslas I believe it's government officials can't drive a Tesla, right? What's the issue there?
So year over year, their sales are down 19%. And what we're seeing is that a local competitor is definitely coming up higher. And Tesla's having to deal with a lot of things shifted, even with Starbucks. A lot of things shifted post-pandemic because they had that very stringent COVID-0 policy. And that made a lot of consumers shift away from American companies that maybe were there. And they're a lot more cautious. And also, look at China. They've lost $7 trillion of market cap this year. They're definitely going through a real estate collapse. And so that is making their markets come down. And it's overall making the consumer a lot tighter on their money. They're having a problem with their economy. Not so different than we are, although we haven't had that kind of market problem disruption. So overall, I think demand is weak in China as a whole. And certainly it might disproportionately affect American multinationals because of the government.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, because there had been all this talk about, I guess, the rebound in China in a post-COVID world, and it hasn't happened to the degree that was expected. And when you think about Tesla, when you go back to Tesla, I do wonder if some of this, there's been talk about kind of where EVs are and how much data that they have, and if that is some of the concern, the backdrop in the, you can't have a Tesla.
Well, yeah, because just like there's the concern in the U.S. that TikTok is tracking individual U.S. citizens' information, a Tesla company is going to know exactly what the Chinese public is doing, where they're going, how they're going, and that's a lot of data for American to have on U.S. citizens, or Chinese citizens.
Okay. And then Starbucks. Can Starbucks regain any market share in China? Because obviously, it's not a data tracker like, say, a Tesla or Apple. It's not a tech company.
I think the problem with Starbucks and China specifically is people really, when you take people off with a COVID-0 policy and they get off of Starbucks and they start going to alternatives or even doing stuff at home, Starbucks is pricey. We're talking about the Chinese consumer who has a lot less, net capital or money to spend on a luxury like a coffee. And so I think China's demand just kind of evaporated to an extent with COVID, and it just hasn't come back. And then you already are dealing with a weakening economy. So the Starbucks isn't going to be on the top of the list. So when it comes back and everyone's back and the society's reopened and they have money again, sure, can Starbucks recover? Yes, but I wouldn't. They've already lowered their guidance from like 4 to 6% to low single digits this year for China. So I think that they're saying that the economy is not going to recover this year for them.
I do wonder if part of it is like it's habits in a different way, right?
Yes.
Because obviously, like to your point, because of the COVID-0 policy, there were changing patterns, changing habits. But the original habits is it's the tea culture.
Right,
so
absolutely.
You know.
So true. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, forget the coffee. Let's go back to tea. Very true.
I do like my coffee. I have full disclosure. You can't see it on camera, but I've got my cup. Now you can see it on camera. I've got my cup over here, my cup of Joe, but they're not there yet with that respect. All right, let's broaden this out, kind of broad market. We've been watching some weakness overall in the market recently, and we've just been kind of getting everyone's take on where things stand. What's your take on the market overall right now?
You're really getting two different messages. If you listen to this administration and sort of, Wall Street, which we're on, you're hearing the market is fine. We're either going to have a soft landing or no landing at all. We're recovering. We're fine. When you look at the Fed beige book that just recently came out that was done before the March CPI print, you're really seeing weakness across the board in all of the districts. I mean, manufacturing flat, everything's coming down. The jobs numbers look good, but they're mostly part-time. People are having to have, even if wages are rising, they're cutting people's hours. So overall, you're getting such different information and people don't understand. But overall, this economy is definitely weakening, unfortunately.
All right, Rebecca Walser, thank you so much.
Thank
that was
you.
Rebecca Walser, President, Walser Wealth Management.